again, the agency stood up very quickly, so that organically, now some parts of the agency began, you had a component that was lodged somewhere else and moved, and that had a relatively mature structure. But the intelligence function at DHS, intelligence and analysis, was built from scratch. So the process of clearing people, which is very cumbersome, the process of hiring people, as General Hayden said, the competition for people with skills when the intelligence community in general was dramatically increasing. All of these things, I think, made it very hard to hire organically. The second issue is that a lot of the function performed by intelligence and analysis in DHS is analytic as opposed to operational. In other words, although there are operational intelligence collection elements at DHS, they're not largely in intelligence and analysis. Some of it's in the Coast Guard, some of it's in Customs and Border Protection. And analysis is probably an area where actually contracting makes a fair amount of sense, because there you're drawing on skills, many of which are actually pretty well developed in the civilian sector. Some of the sensitivities that occur when you use a contractor operationally are not really present when you use them to perform analytical work. There are issues about language. There are issues involving, particular knowledge of particular types of subject matter. So I think in that sense, it probably makes sense to have a larger role for contractors than you would if you had a higher element of what you're doing focused on operational activity. I would expect over time, as budget stabilizes and as the agency matures, the balance will move more to an organic in-house capability. But let me come back to my earlier point. If you don't want to fund the people, then you can't complain when you're going to use contractors. I think General Hayden put it, Mike Hayden put it earlier. He said, look, if you give us a mission, but you don't fund slots, FTEs, then that mission is going to be performed using contractors. And so this is an area where, Congress could take a big step forward in achieving a rebalancing of this if they are prepared to fund that, function.
Speaking of double dipping, General Hayden, you just said that when you first heard that Mr. Panetta had briefed the Hill, your reaction was, why this program? Which makes it sound like you might think that there are other programs.
No, the first reaction was, what? Look, this is through a glass darkly and a carom shot, but I get word that the director felt as if there was a covert action underway about which he had to go to brief the Hill, and the Hill had not been briefed on it. My first reaction was, what could he possibly be talking about? Because we were very aggressive in briefing the Hill during my time there, and I'll take that much credit for it. And I'll also add that I also know that 2008 was a leap year, and we're going to have the Olympics, and we're going to have a presidential election. So even if you put aside any noble motives on my part, and I actually think there were, and I actually think there are at the agency consistently, to hide the ball from Congress on anything during this time frame would have been suicidal. And so our threshold for going up there to brief was incredibly low. All right? I mean, really, when we went up there with things we didn't even have to pass on. No, go tell the Hill. And so when I first got the story, I just couldn't figure out what this possibly could be.
So there aren't other programs that you think will be or should be briefed to Congress?
No. I went up to Congress and at one point briefed some pretty exciting stuff and was asked during my last year or tenure there, is there anything else? And I said, you know everything I know.
You were saying, sorry, Mike, but so when you said why this program, I assume
Well, my first reaction was, what could this possibly be? Okay. And then when I found out what it was, my first question was, why is that meeting this description? Okay? And again, my field of view was somewhat focused on what happened during my tenure, and I viewed what it was during my tenure as a new start.
All right, I have to wrap this up. I want to apologize to my panelists for bringing them into the line of fire this way. This wasn't the initial intention, but I guess you're used to this, I guess. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time and braving this to Jack and General Hayden and Secretary Chertoff. And thanks to the National Press Club for putting this together. And I'm going to turn it over to our host, and we're done.
And I would like to thank our panel on behalf of the Press Club. Thank you so much for taking time today to be with us. As I said, on an August day when most people are out of town, except for those of us in this room. Thank you all for attending. And as a reminder, this is a joint Newsmakers and Book and Author Committee event, and the book and author part will commence afterwards. Joe will be available to sign his book just outside the doors of the Homeland Lounge. Thank you all for joining us today.